आएगा जा रहे हो आगे जा। अरे वो नाच में ले लो, नहीं मिलेगा तो फिर अभी जाएगा किधर भी। वो शॉट है ना रोशन, जा ले लो नहीं तो आ जाएगा अभी फटाफट आने वाला हो। चलो कैमरा पीछे आ जाओ। कहाँ घुसे? ये कौन है रे? पार्टी पार्टी है रे, पार्टी है पार्टी है।
एक मिनट जरा साइड दे जरा प्लीज, जरा आप जरा एक
अरे पार्टी पार्टी
She will continue to inspire me to be a better actor and, more importantly, a better human being. This celebration affirms my profound pride in being her son. It is a special privilege to be celebrating her life and her legacy amidst all of you. Thank you for being with me and my family.
Thank you, Pratik. On behalf of HarperCollins Publishers India, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you. I hope it's not too warm. Mr. Bachchan, thank you so much for agreeing to come to the...
Thank you, Shantanu, for those words from an editor. And you know, a writer is more comfortable writing than speaking in public. Can you hear me? Yeah. So, as I said, a writer is more comfortable before a computer or making notes than actually speaking in public, but I'll try. And I'm so overwhelmed to see the number of you who have turned out on a warm, muggy night. And I'm really, really grateful to Amitabh ji for agreeing not only to release the book, but also read from it. I feel really privileged. And as for Shyam, he's been like not only Smita's mentor, but he's been available anytime I wanted any information, any clarification. Actually, somebody said, initial chapters, said there's more of Shyam Benegal here than Smita. That was because that was the relationship that I was trying to explore over there. And I just wonder why I never got down to writing a book all these days, though I've contributed chapters to books by others. But maybe I was waiting for inspiration. And I think Smita sparked my imagination at some point. And unfortunately, I had never met her when she was alive. But I was aware and appreciated the work that she had done in cinema. So this book is as much as a journey for me to discover the remarkable woman behind the screen image. And to help me along the way, there's been her family, Anita, Mr. Patil, and years ago, the late her mother, Vidyatai. They have been so generous with their time and their memories to, you know, fill out my knowledge of Smita the person. And her friends, her directors and fellow actors and others who work with her, they've all shared their insights and impressions of her to enrich my journey. And I would be amiss if I don't thank my writing fraternity. They've been so, so helpful in right from tracking down obscure films to giving me those all-important telephone numbers, sharing their old interviews, because I never covered the industry when I still don't do. So a big thanks to my fraternity here, writing fraternity, for making this book possible. And I just wanted to end with the saying that, you know, Smita, everybody was so eager to share their impressions of her. It's as if there was she had a magical and a magnetic power, which I feel privileged to share today. And then, you know, somehow get this book going. I think towards the end, I just want to say, with so many film people around me, they say, let the film speak for itself. Now I'll just echo that and say, let the book speak for itself. And I hope you'll have a good reading. And I just have one more announcement. Deepti Naval and Amol Palekar were to be here today, and they were to be part of the reading from the text. Unfortunately, sudden illness in the family has prevented them from coming here and being with us. We miss them, but wish them all well. Thank you.
Thank you, Maithili. May I now request Mr. Bachchan to release the book and present a first copy of the book to Mr. Shyam Benegal.
We also have my mother's father joining us, Mr. Shivaji Rao Patil.
I'd like to request Mr. Bachchan to present a copy of the book to Mr. Shivaji Rao Patil. Mr. Bachchan, may I now request you to say a few words?
Shyamji, Maithili ji, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, my deepest apologies for being late this evening. There was a deep-rooted controversy that was hatched on the highway today, and they succeeded in breaking my tradition of arriving punctually at almost all functions, so I do hope you will excuse me. I always fall short of words whenever I have to speak about Smita and her association with me and with the industry. From the very first moment that we came to know of her was through her face on television. And there was always something very unusual about the way she presented herself, about the way she looked, about the way she conducted her life. And when I had the great opportunity to work with her, I realized so many other things that were extremely, extremely unique about Smita. Smita looked very frail and gentle, almost as frail as some of the wonderful flowers that she used to bring to me when I had my accident. But she was a strong woman, extremely strong, very committed to not just her work, but into her beliefs, in what she believed was right and what was wrong. Some of the things that she did in cinema with me were totally against her nature, particularly a film like Namak Halal, where she had to do a rain dance with me. And she felt it was absolutely away from her culture and thinking, but because it was contracted to do something, we had to go ahead with it. And all the time I used to keep reassuring her that everything will be fine. And then I think a month or two after the film released, we happened to be in the same city and we met up. And she said, you know, Amitabh, I've worked in so many good films, great cinema, but I feel so sad because at the airport today, all they were referring to was Namak Halal. And she somehow felt a little awkward and embarrassed about that. But the greatest thing that I want to recall about Smita is her having a sense of premonition. She was a dear friend of mine. We worked together in some very important films. But other than meeting her on sets, I never really had a social equation with her. And so when I was shooting for my film Coolie in Bangalore, one night, very late, almost 2 o'clock in the morning, the hotel receptionist called and said, "You have a phone call, sir, and would you like to take it?" So I said, "It's really late and I have to get up early." "Who is it?" They said, "It's Smita Patil." This was a shock to me because I had never ever spoken to her on the phone. Neither had she called, nor I called her. And I felt that maybe, there's something wrong and I need to take this call, so I did. And she said, "Amitabh, are you all right?" I said, "Yes, why?" "No, I just had a very bad dream and I was thinking about you and I hope you keep healthy and I hope you keep well. And I just had to talk to you and tell you about this." So I said, "Oh, thank you, I'm doing fine and the shooting's going on well." The next morning, I had my accident in Coolie. And I cannot but think of those moments when Smita had this premonition about something going wrong with me. I've read through some of the portions of this book, and I must congratulate you, Maithili ji, for really putting across the book in a great amount of elegance and eloquence as well. There are portions which have been very deeply researched, and many of you who did not know her, as did Maithili did not know her, she has put together something which will give an indication of who and what Smita Patil really was. I'm going to read a few portions of this book a little later, but these are some of the words that I remember today about Smita. She was ill during a time when I was about to travel to Mauritius, and I finished very late at night here at a concert and caught a flight to Mauritius, and when I reached Mauritius, she had left us. It'll always be one of my most saddest moments because she was not just a dear friend and colleague, but a great human being. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Bachchan. Mr. Benigal, a few words from you.
Good evening. It's Smita's 60th birth anniversary today. Well, she lived only about 30 years of these 60 years. And the latter 30 years, of course, her memory is very fresh, certainly in my mind and all her friends and colleagues. And I see her other directors here in front of me. What was extraordinary about Smita was that she would melt into a crowd. You wouldn't be able to tell her from anybody else. But as soon as she came in front of the camera, she just blossomed. It was quite extraordinary, this blossoming of Smita in front of the camera. Because I remember when I first met her, she was about 19 years of age. She had just made a film with Arun Khopkar, a student film at the FTII. And I saw her and I was struck by the fact that here was someone that had this kind of compelling presence on the screen. And I wanted to meet her. My sound recordist at the time, Hitendra Ghosh, he knew her. He said, "Of course, definitely you can meet her. She just lives behind your office, actually." So he went and told her that I was interested in seeing her because I wanted to take her in a film. At that time, of course, it was a children's film that I wanted her for, which was called Charandas Chor. And she really didn't want to be in films at all. In fact, it required a fair amount of persuasion, I think, from both her parents to ask her to see me. So when I finally met her, then of course it was much easier. And I put her in Charandas Chor. I wasn't sure how it would work because she was not trained. She'd never done any kind of film except for this little film with Arun Khopkar. And before that, I was told that she had done a little bit of theater and, dance groups and so on and so forth, and different kinds of social situations, social work situations with her mother. But otherwise, she'd done nothing at all that remotely was close to either cinema or theater. And here she was, when she came and I saw her, the first thing that struck me about her was that she was so grounded as a person. When you met her, you could immediately see that she was extremely grounded. And to me, that was the most important thing. And Govind Nilani, who's here, who's also one of our directors, but he was my cameraman, and he noticed that about Smita the first time he saw her. And when we put her in Charandas Chor, which was a children's film, I mean, she was quite extraordinary. She really, she was quite reluctant because she was about to give an examination or something, and we had taken her away from that. But her mother was insistent that she should be in the film and not give it up, because that was her plan, to give up the film. But after that, of course, there was no problem about her being in a film after, which we made called Nishant. And when she acted in Nishant, of course, she became the center of everything. There was Shabana Azmi and there was Smita Patil. And both of them were in that film together, and it was pure electricity that went on there. Not always. Sometimes it would also short circuit, I think. Shabana's here. And these were some of those early problems, but eventually they got along extremely well together. And she gave a very good performance in Isha, just as much as Shabana gave an extraordinary performance in that film. And after that, she acted for a film called Manthan with me. And one particular day, I remember, she had to be dressed up as a village woman. And we were shooting in a village about 45 or 50 kilometers from Rajkot, and this little village. It was a Sunday, and it was pretty hot, and she was sort of sitting in the shade with other village women. And there was a bunch of kids, college kids, who'd come cycling, for so many kilometers from Rajkot, because they'd heard that there was some film unit from Bombay that was making a film there. And they obviously expected, I think, that they would see Amitabh Bachchan. But obviously they didn't see that. They were very disappointed. And then they came around, and I remember one of them whispering to the other behind me, saying, "Who's the heroine of this film?" So someone there pointed out to Smita and said, "I think she is the heroine." This fellow looks at him and says, "She can't be the heroine. She's just from this village. How can she be the heroine?" This kind of thing. It was quite extraordinary about her. The moment she came in front of the camera, of course, it would all suddenly change, because there was something very spontaneous and very natural about a way she gave a performance. Untrained as she was, she had an instinct that was extraordinary. And of course, as she went on, the quality of her work became better and better. And by the time, of course, her very fourth film, which was Bhumika, she'd already won the national award. And a couple of films later, she'd won the national award once again, and so on. And in the 10 or 11 years of her as a film actor, she had already done work that most people take a lifetime to do. So that was something about Smita that I'll never forget, because she's quite an extraordinary person, extraordinary actress, and a very, very fine human being. But that's what I remember most. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benegal. I would now like.
Much of what I intended to say, Shyam has already said. Mercifully, I've got it written so you know that I didn't copy it. There isn't any light over here, but I'm going to try my best. I first set eyes on her in a diploma film of FTII directed by Arun Khopkar. I think it was called Tivra Madhyam. There was a long shot in which she was playing the Tanpura. I was struck by her raw beauty and the stillness she exuded. She was born for the camera. It lingered over her face, and she held it captive without the slightest effort. Several years later, I met Smita Patil on the sets of Shyam Benegal's Nishant. It was a difficult role for one as young as her. In the film, her husband, Nasiruddin Shah, falls in love with my character, Sushila, kidnaps her, and brings her home. And you had these silent shots of Smita, hurt, resentment, anger, jealousy, and yet unable to see anything because she was trapped in a feudal structure. It is to Shyam Benegal's credit, who understands the complexity of feudal society so well, ably aided, of course, by Vijay Tendulkar, that in two significant but very small but significant scenes, where Smita comes to offer me food, apparently matter of fact, almost resentful. But she brought a layer of such empathy to the plight of the two women bonded together through a patriarchal feudal society that the tears dropped from my eyes without knowing. That is what the crux of film acting is. It is a collaborative effort in which how well you act depends on the support that you get from your co-actor. I have had the pleasure of working with Smita in Nishant, Arth, Mandi, Oonch Neech Beach, in roles far apart from each other. I felt both challenged and inspired by her as a co-actor. We had so much in common. We come from similar backgrounds, were introduced by Shyam Benegal, had similar aesthetics, and worked in the same kind of cinema. Today in public memory, I really think I could well be Shabana Patil and she Smita Azmi, as far as public memory goes. She had a short career span, and yet 29 years after she passed away, parallel cinema in India will never be mentioned without Smita Patil's name in golden letters. We had some fun times together. I'm sure Shyam will recall that our film Nishant was chosen as the official selection from India for the Cannes Film Festival. We were given the handsome sum of $8 each to tide through that whole week that we were going to be there. And we were heavily dependent on advertising material which refused to come in a place like Cannes. So Shyam Benegal said, listen, you girls, I want you to wear your best Kanjivaram sarees and just walk up and down the promenade. This was in 1976. And that's what we did. At 8 o'clock in the morning, with everybody was in shorts and bikinis, we would be wearing our sarees with our bindis and walk, and everybody would look around to look at us, and we would say, we have a film, please come. We've got a film, we are from India, please come. And the house was full. So it worked. Alas, Smita and I could never be friends. The rivalry between us, some of it manufactured by the media, some of it real, caused tension. I have said it before, acknowledged it before, and I do so again, that I have been guilty of making uncharitable remarks about her, and I regret it. There were efforts at reconciliation, and we were able to maintain civility, but it never turned into friendship. But at no point did that spill over to our families. Smita was a star by the time she worked in Sagar Sarhadi's Bazaar and they were shooting in Hyderabad, and obviously she got the best room in the hotel. 2 weeks later, my mother, Shaukat Kaifi, who had a small but significant part in the film, arrived, by which time Smita had quietly left her room, given it up for my mother, and shifted into a smaller room without letting anybody know. It was weeks later that my mother got to know, and when she protested, Smita would have none of it. That was the kind of graciousness which came to her because she was Shivaji Rao Patil and Vidya Patil's daughter. Ma, Papa, Anita, Manya have embraced me like one of their own. Human relationships are complex, and I'm grateful for the trust they've placed in me. It's a very personal thing that I'm about to share now. There was a time when young Pratik was lost and didn't know what he wanted to do. And Ma and Anita called me and said, "We want you to take charge of Pratik." Need I say more? I'm fond of saying that India is a country that lives in several centuries simultaneously and is full of contradictions. Smita Patil was a microcosm of India, a mix of contradictions. She was traditional and modern, strong and fragile, confident and vulnerable. I would watch in amazement as she would drive a jeep with such panache across India with no driver, just a girlfriend. She rode a motorbike like a professional and played volleyball like a champion. She was one of the boys on the sets of Mandi, but she was also very feminine and deeply traditional, and sometimes intimidated easily. I think it's these contradictions that were both her strength and her weakness, but it was also that made her an artist who will always be spoken of when the finest actors of Indian cinema are counted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shabana ji. May I
As Shantanu mentioned, my name is Adit, and I am Smita's nephew. Her accolades and accomplishments are well known and well documented, so I'm going to talk to you about something that's much more personal and much more intimate. I spent the first 5 years of my life, the formative years of my childhood, with Smita, whom I affectionately called Mityama. We lived in Tardev at the top of Forjet Hill in a beautiful sun-drenched flat. I lived there with Ma, with Papa, and my Aunt Manya, and those were by far the happiest years of my childhood and my entire life. Mityama took me everywhere on shoots, oftentimes telling people I was her son. I even played her child in a few films, notably Tarang. So there I was, my first time on the silver screen, and what was I doing? Sleeping on her shoulders and probably drooling all over her blouse. The years I spent with her, in her arms, in her lap, on airplanes, in cars, on movie sets, and by her side, and in the sunlit veranda of our home in Tardo, is when I first discovered, for the very first time, how it felt to be truly and deeply loved by somebody. The absolute affection that she bestowed upon me, along with Ma and Papa and my Aunt Manya, built the foundation on which 38 years of my life is built upon. Mityama radiated love no like nobody else I have ever come across. I saw it in her eyes, and I felt it in her touch every time she wiped away my tears, every time she ran her hands through my hair as I drifted off to sleep each night. I'm blessed more than I could put into words to be loved in the way that she loved me. And it has made me the person that you see standing before you today. Mitya Ma also never ever forgot who she was and where she came from. There was an instance that I remember with vivid clarity. We were shooting in a small village, and as the shoot wrapped, her Honda Accord was surrounded by hundreds of villagers who had somehow found out she was there. She could have pushed through the crowd and driven away, but instead, after a long day of work, she stood through the sunroof for hours, greeting people, touching their hands, smiling, and speaking to them. Instances like this and many others, I think, really set her apart and make her unique in an industry that's often filled with oversized egos and attitude. Her death was a profound loss for me, as it was for all of you. She had so much more love to give to cinema, to the world, to her friends and family, and especially to Pratik, whose spirit and fire I see in his eyes and in the eyes of my own daughter, who my wife and I named Zoe Smita. I would like to close by quoting noted British philosopher Alan Watts. From time to time, there arises in human beings people that radiate love just as naturally as the sun gives out heat. Happy birthday, Mitya Ma. I love you.
Up the podium, I think it's, Adit, you did that. You made us also emotional. But I'm going to stick to what I'm supposed to be doing with my specs, and yes, there is no light here. I'm going to read out a small paragraph from a little piece that I've written in the book. When I did Fire, my first film that was released, I was often compared to Smita Patil. I didn't even dare take it as a compliment, as I felt the similarity ended with the color of our skin. Although for her, that too fluctuated when she did mainstream films, for which she had to lighten her skin and become glamorous. I could only imagine her struggle in straddling the two worlds of Indian cinema that almost reflected two dramatically opposite expectations, especially from female actors. It was later in 2000 that I realized that there were many more things in common between us. This journey of sisterhood started with my meeting her elder sister, Anita Patil Deshmukh. I met Anita in Chicago for a special screening of Bhavandar, which was being organized by IDS, an NGO she volunteered with. It took us precisely one dinner evening to bond, and from that day, Anita became Thai. Anita became Thai for me, and Smita Patil was not just the actor I admired on screen, but she was Smee, a sister I could never meet. When I heard about her struggle and dilemmas, her simplicity and concerns, her values and passions, it all seemed too familiar. Thai would often draw parallels while talking about her and me, as if she was talking about the same person. Their parents are Ma and Papa for me. This was written when Ma was still with us. And even though I don't meet them as often as I would want to, I hope I'm one of their 2 a.m. calls, if they should ever need. In some mystical way, I now feel part of the family. Thai once gave me Smee's silver bracelet, which sadly doesn't fit me. She must have had much thinner, daintier wrists. But it is one of my most precious possessions. There are very few regrets in my life, but my longing for that sister I never met and can never meet is definitely one of them. Smita Patil's place in Indian cinema is unquestionable, and so is Smee's in my life. Now I will read from a chapter that Maithili has written called The Woman Behind the Image. How do you separate the image from the person? Do the two meld into each other at some deep subterranean level? We always felt that the essential Smita is an amalgam of what we have responded to in cinema and learned to treasure, appreciate, and love. So what was Smita like as a person? Some words recur with metronomic regularity: down to earth, warm, sincere, rooted, grounded, compassionate, sensitive, caring, carefree. Myriad adjectives with their infinite connotations, adding up to a woman with high emotional intelligence. Then there are contrary pairs, like you had said: possessive and generous, demanding and giving, impulsive and pragmatic, ambitious and unworldly, fun-loving and moody. Now, these contrarian combinations are what intrigue us. Mohan Agashe, who was her longtime psychiatrist friend and a co-star of many films, says, "I describe her as an illusion." Sorry. She might not be intellectual, but she was definitely very sensitive, intense. And there were people all over the world who cared for her. Old John Warrington, the late British film critic, regular at our film festivals, was so smitten. From Warrington to a Polish actor to a Swedish director, they were all in love with her. She was so intense and so charming. One would be scared that she'd go mad when she started laughing. Anita's favorite term for her sister is free bird, a free spirit. This free-spirited attitude was innate to her right from her childhood to the time she became an actor and then a star. Smita wanted to be at the wheel, drive all the time. She'd tell the driver, "Tum piche baitho, main chalaungi." She was also very impatient. If somebody misbehaved on the road, she did not and didn't follow any rules, she'd give them the choicest of galis. Anita, who characterizes herself as being an obedient child, marvels at how Smita had an inborn sense of adventure. Smita had this great craving to drive a jhonga, the army jeep. She had a friend, Dilshad. She was one of the ADs on Attenborough's Gandhi, who was just as crazy. I don't know how the hell they got hold of a jhonga, Anita says. They drove all the way from Delhi to Bombay in those days. It was scary. I told Smee, think of your face. What will happen to your career if anything happens to your face? She didn't give a damn. What will happen? She'd say without a care. Chambal was not safe at that time. Her only condition was that don't tell Ma. And my condition was she had to call every single night. Until she reached Bombay, my heart was in my mouth. Anita adds, the girls wore turbans, they wore pants and shirts as if that was a protection enough. Smita's first car was a small Fiat, a two-seater according to Hitendra Ghosh. She dragged him home and wanted him to ride with her when she drove. He was a bit scared, he confesses. He told her, you're driving in Tardev and what if you go and dash into something? But drive with her, he had to. Friends couldn't be let off so easily. This desire to drive extended to bikes too. Smita graduated from bicycle to scooter, as most Pune girls did. She wanted to drive a big motorbike. And she pestered Hitendra Ghosh, to somehow help her to do this. He had become part of the family when they were staying at Forget Street. Smita badgered Hitu to get her to ride a bike. He realized that Aladdin, a sound engineer, lived in the same building as Smita. Aladdin had two sons and they had a bike. So Hitu approached them and asked them if they could teach Smita. They readily agreed and taught her in her small Tardev lane. Once on a film unit, a lot of bikes were brought for the shoot. Smita asked the stuntman to teach her to ride a bike properly, and he obliged. Ever since, she rode a bike whenever she could. It is something Shabana speaks of with awe. When they were together shooting for Mandi, Shabana learned that the tomboy who played volleyball with the boys could also ride a bike. Difficult to imagine the traditional Smita we see in handloom saris as a biker girl. Thank you.
Just from the book.
Try and manage. These are the very first words of the book, and it's titled Anchored to Her Puneri Roots. It is only the truly local that can be truly universal. So goes the adage to validate the unvarnished reality of art cinema. Only the truly rooted actor can grow into the versatility demanded of a performer who must often be a chameleon. Rootedness negates the cultural deracination that sometimes follows an actor's journey in essaying so many roles, getting under so many skins. Being aware of her roots gave an actor like Smita Patil intuitive strength to blossom with such passionate spontaneity that you cannot quite imagine any other actor in the role she played. She owned the role. You cannot say this of many actors. Art was inborn, the craft she learned. Together, art and craft melded into a magic of Smita-ness. How does one trace this journey, this phenomena of being Smita? Life is not a series of easy transitions. From happy childhood to the usual turbulence of adolescence to the confident maturity of an adulthood, most people have decades at their disposal to reach the assurance of adulthood and grow along with the years, garnering experience to smoothen the passage of life. In hindsight, it seems as if Smita's all too brief journey was a compression of varied experiences, a telescoping of events that seeped into her sensibility. The Smita we remember is an astonishingly well-rounded person with so many dimensions to discover and cherish. Strong and sensitive, independent and vulnerable, confident and insecure, she had an innate courage to live with contradictions even as she tried to reconcile them. Branded in memory is a searing sincerity and lust for living life to its limits. A childlike trust and curiosity, thoughtful and at the same time playful, as if the child in her lingered into adulthood. Yet, underneath it all was an enduring simplicity, the rootedness of a supple sapling that could bend and sway with every passing breeze but not break. The legacy of her work leaves its mark on our minds, finding us grappling as if in the dark to capture the essence of her being. This core essence one can trace back to her childhood and a remarkable family. It is not surprising that Smita was born in a city that was a bastion of Maratha power and custodian of Maharashtrian culture at its authentic, representative best. This culture's outstanding qualities are those that endure intellectual rigor, robust rationality that kept alive a reformist tradition, an almost puritanical restraint and lack of ostentation. Here, the grace of cultivated austerity was the perfect match for sturdy pragmatism. Smita's parents, Vidya and Shivaji Rao Patil, are heirs to this or to these essential virtues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bachchan, and we couldn't have asked for a better way to end the evening than a reading by him to publish this book. And I hope, and from the way people have taken to the evening here, I hope the book will go into many reprints. Mr. Bachchan, thank you so much for your time and for reading the passage from the book. Mr. Benegal, a warm note of thanks to you for your presence here today. Shabana ji, thank you so much for that lovely, lovely speech, and it was really touching. And Nandita, thank you for reading out from the book. Thank you, all of you. Anita, I want to thank you because this evening wouldn't have been possible but for Anita. I'd like to thank Hotel Sofitel for hosting the evening. Thank you all. The books are available for sale, and you could get your copies signed by Maithili. Thank you all.
I'll look up.
What's the email?
PRABA.
Yeah.
You don't read drafty mail at all? Okay, done. If you don't know that, I don't write a movie because I lost my school. PRABA.
Yeah, I know.
Dot Mahajan at gmail.
Okay. I just forwarded it.
What should I do? Look, sorry.
I forwarded it.
ఇక్కడ ఎవరు సైన్ చేసుకోలేదు చూస్తా సైన్ చేస్తా తన బ్యాగ్ తెచ్చుకుంటాను